Luke told me.
Mr. Bean, can I grab something from my locker? I left my questions.
Wait till Aiden comes back. And, yeah, when Aiden comes back.
Okay.
So don't forget about this. If you were planning on giving me any to-be verb rewrites for Grapes of Wrath essays, you can do so by the end of the day. So if you need to print something out during lunch or study hall, ask me for a pass and I can write one out for you. Again, it's totally optional. So if you're going, I didn't do that, that's not hurting you. It's only something that could be of use for you. So as long as I get it by the end of the day, that's fine. It's not that it has to be here by the end of the period or anything like that.
Sorry.
Ben's here. Ben, we didn't start anything, but you can grab an iPad then. End of the period, because we're probably going to be butting up to the end of the period when bell rings and all that kind of stuff. You can just leave your iPad on the desk because next period is going to be using them, so you don't have to worry about traffic jam of plugging the hole in or anything like that. In a little bit, we're going to start going over the multiple choice questions. Anyone having issues like logging on to the Socrative or trying to, if you run into issues, let me know because sometimes there's a little bit with the Wi-Fi where we need to change, but we'll take care of that. Tomorrow, that's when we'll do the reading check quiz for the Catcher in the Rye. So you want to be done with the book if you're not already. We'll do reading check quiz tomorrow, and then we'll go over some things with it tomorrow and Wednesday. So any questions you have, feel free to come in with, and those will be some of the points to go over. So that you don't hyperventilate in advance or anything like that. On your weekly syllabus for Thursday and Friday, you see the letters TWA. You're not writing a TWA on Thursday or Friday. What's going to happen on Thursday and Friday, you're going to break off into groups. I'm going to give you an AP prompt, it's rhetorical analysis, and then I'm going to give you 4 essays that students wrote for that prompt on the AP exam. You're scoring them. So it's just going to get practice to see the differences, among like theoretically an 8, a 6, a 4. So not only do you looking at your writing and classmates, but you see things that actually happen on the AP exam. So we do that multiple times throughout the course of the year, but you are not writing a TW on Thursday or Friday.
For this TW, typically like the actual, like what you would actually do, that's not bumping up or anything.
Wait, I'm sorry?
For the one that we're doing, are you not bumping it up or are you just really adding anything?
So far as scores?
Yeah.
Yeah, they won't be bumped up anymore. Yep. Abby's very happy to have found out that on Monday she does not have school, and neither do any of you have school next Monday because of Columbus Day. When you come back on Tuesday, she's more pumped up for her TWA, which you will also have on Tuesday. Tuesday of next week, you are going to have a DRQ TWA. It is going to be a prompt from an AP exam, so it has absolutely nothing to do with the Catcher in the Rye. Theoretically, you could still, write about the Catcher in the Rye with it, but you're under no obligation to do so. I am going to give you that prompt on Wednesday. We are not talking about it, but you will have from Wednesday to Tuesday of next week to look over that prompt, and you can brainstorm, think about what you would want to use. So it's not going to be, okay, let's dissect your prompt, but you won't be surprised at what your prompt is on Tuesday of next week because you will already have the ability to plan as much or as little as you want. Also under the upcoming dates, I think I have it listed for the 17th, which is a Monday, 2 weeks from today. That's when we'll do our Catcher in the Rye essay. That is also going to be a TWA. That prompt as well, you will get about a week in advance, and we will talk about it before you actually have to do it. So your next 2 essays, it's the 11th and it's the 17th, both in class, but both you have prompt in advance to take care of. So we'll handle all that stuff as it comes forward, but just wanted you to be aware of it. Any questions about anything? Figure out the meaning of life over the weekend. Good. So hold that near and dear. Good. Okay. Anybody have any login issues getting the Socrative? And if you don't have the app on your iPad, you can go through Chrome.
I just got a spinny wheel.
Okay, it probably does not have the right Wi-Fi.
I tried to get on Emerald.
Yep, that's the wrong one. Actually, yeah, that's so you want mobile. It might still circle for a little bit, but it should come up. All right. What we're going to do is we're taking a look at the first passage. We're only going to have time to do one passage. Next period, I'm going to go over the second passage with them. I'm going to record that lesson and I'm going to post it so that whether you have more issues with the first passage or second passage, you can see answer, explanation, rationale, all that stuff. You are going to get your Scantrons back probably tomorrow. They're in progress book and all that stuff. I just don't think we're going to have time at the end of class to get them out to you. Couple things, or PowerSchool, whatever that group was called. And I don't know really what you see when you log into PowerSchool or not. Last week you had 2 AP multiple choice quiz grades going into this quiz grades. You had the capture on the right that you worked together with group 31 questions, and then you had Fridays, which was 24. So combined point value of those would be, think hard, 18 times rough. 31 and 24. You don't even have to carry, so you had 55. Each assignment I have, so it shows up as out of 31, it shows up out of 24, but the total point value was really 16.5 for capture, 12 for Friday. So it's not that if, say, Kaylee got a 13 out of 24, that you got a 13 out of 12, but she would have got a 6.5 then out of 12. So it did not change your score, but I did not want 55 points worth of AP multiple choice quizzes going in last week. It was too early in the year, I thought, for that amount. So you got a lot of practice with the questions. It doesn't change, what the scores were, but the amount of weight attached to those scores changed. So I don't know if that shows up on your end. Like all your essays always show up as being 100 points, but they're not 100 points. You've had a 35.1, you've had a 50.1. The one that you do with your DRQ next week is going to be 25 points. So it's just easier to put in the percent grades for them. So they were not worth as many points as you would have thought. What better way on a writing test to assess your writing ability than to take multiple choice questions? I cannot think of a better way to assess a person's writing ability than to do multiple choice questions on the AP exam. Whoever came up with that idea was a genius. Way better than anything I could think of you doing on a writing exam. But that is what it is. I don't think they're a great idea. I don't like it, but that's just part of what it is. So we can't really complain about it because it's fact of life, except I just did. When you take your AP exam, you'll have 4 passages and you'll have about 12 to 15 questions per passage. Both passages that you did last week were from past AP exams. They were not on the same. I took from 2 different tests, put them together. I would say my guess is of the 4 passages that you end up answering, 1 passage you'll think is fairly easy, 2 you'll think are okay, 1 more challenging. I don't think you'll go, this one was impossible. You might have said that on Friday, but I think when you do the AP exam, you'll probably go, this one was challenging. Both of the ones that you did, I'm thinking people would put in the challenging category. Reason being, 3 passages, or 4 passages, 3 of them will be 20th or 21st century. 1 of them will be pre-20th century, so 1800s and earlier. Both passages that you had here were from before the 20th century. And so a lot of times I think the older passages, because the language is different, the diction, the syntax, the overall arguments, the way they're set up, constructed, they just read a little bit probably more difficult than standard traditional ones do. So early, I like to give you ones that I think are being challenging, and then you kind of get used to them, and as the year goes by, they don't seem as bad. As opposed to, here are the easy passages, and then in January you go, wow, they got really difficult all of a sudden. I don't like that idea nearly as much. Probably around January is when you'll start to get more comfortable with them. And the only explanation I have for it is you just get more familiar. We go over them, and you just kind of get used to it. So I don't know if Abby will ever go, these things are wonderful, I love them, piece of cake. But I think the familiarity, the comfort level with them will gradually improve as we do things like these throughout the course of the year. So we're going to take a look at that very first passage. Anyone kind of summarize what was going on in the first passage, or what ideas that remember, aware of?
Somebody died.
Certainly seems like, or at least illness is taking place. I mean, the death does get mentioned, but we certainly know that we have a person where it seems like there's probably some kind of illness, and we have a physician taking a look at this person to try to diagnose.
The main thing that the narrator talked about was fear, and
Yeah, that word probably shows up more so than anything else, and a lot of within the questions themselves, you'll see fear coming up. So, and certainly fear and illness and diagnosis, all those things would make sense that they would go together. That would be the main gist of what's happening. Questions will certainly come up. Do I need to read the passage to answer the questions? Yes. Yes. I know it would be a time saver to skip it, but I think the chances of you answering questions correctly, it increases exponentially by reading the passage. And one of the things that will happen over the course of the year as we do more readings, you get better and better at doing a close critical reading, one time through. This is same with all AP exams, but it's still kind of a new thing. And they've changed it with the SAT. You get rewarded for questions you answer right. If you skip or if you answer a question incorrectly, you do not lose points. So there used to be where if you skipped, you did not lose any points. If you got a question incorrect, you lost a quarter of a point, 0.25. But that is no longer the case for any AP exam. So should I guess? Yes. Because your chance goes up when you bubble as opposed to skipping. Also, I would keep track, when you take a test, I would keep track of your answers on here as well, like most of you did. Because let's say there is a question that you skipped, that you come back to, but you forget to skip in your answer sheet, and then you have that uh-oh moment when there's 3 minutes left. At least you then have them written down in the test booklet that you can erase and change them, as opposed to erase, wait, what did I have? I don't know, and then you cry and fail the AP exam. And then you become an AP English teacher for the rest of your life. So you don't want that to happen.
What?
We don't use the word fail. We just go did not pass. It sounds better. What? I got a 4. It just took me 2 times. Like a 2 and a 2 makes a 4. It's, it works. There you go. I did not pass. Which is probably good for you, because I think at this point I kind of know why I did not, and so therefore we can figure it out. Pardon? It tends to be about 85 to 90%. So, look around the room, find the 2 people that you think are below you, and those are the ones who you're going will not pass.
Okay.
If you go, oh, I'm at the bottom.
You're not wrong.
But yeah, probably about 85 to 90. And people hardly ever believe this during the first week of October. This, as a group, as classes, our strength ends up being the multiple choice questions. Not that our essays are poor by any means, but when you compare them nationally, we tend to do really, really well on the multiple choice, more so than we do on the writing. Again, the writing's not bad, but multiple choice is really where you kind of start to turn the 3s into 4s and the 4s into 5s, with the multiple choice. So I know that's hard to believe now, but it will happen. All right, so let me log myself back on here. We got question number 1. Passage contains all the following. 4 of you already answered. If you didn't, you can start to do so now. Paradox, repetition, contrast, apostrophic speech, and then parallel syntax. Of course, take note of the word except in there. Is pretty important. My first question was going to be, and people are already kind of talking about it, anybody know what apostrophic speech is? And it is not the use of apostrophes. Contractions are not apostrophic speech. You have apostrophic speech in The Catcher in the Rye. It is present in there. Anytime Holden talks to Allie, he is using apostrophe. Not apostrophes, but as a literary device, apostrophe. Apostrophic speech, or apostrophe, is when you're speaking to someone who's not present. So when he's talking to Allie, Allie is not there, that would be apostrophic speech. Saturday night, you're doing an essay assignment for me due Monday, and you start swearing at me, you are doing apostrophic speech. Person speaking, praying to any kind of deity, God, would be apostrophic speech. So you're just talking to a person who is not there. That doesn't mean they have to be deceased, but they would not be present. So for this one, you take a look at the answers, and 58% of you went with apostrophic speech, which is correct. Whether it was because you knew it wasn't in there or you just went, I don't know what that term is, I'm going to go with that one. Now keep in mind, if you didn't know what apostrophic speech was, you could still answer the question correctly by being able to locate examples of paradox, repetition, contrast, parallel syntax. You don't have to quote it word for word. Any examples of paradox, though, that you can think of? Aiden?
Whenever he's talking about, like, I don't know the example, but it says,
You're not afraid of a
starving, but you're afraid of
piece of meat on the table. Or a person's not afraid of a lion, but you are afraid of a cat. That would be paradox.
you have a red.
How about pink?
Oh no, sorry.
So that would be paradox. Now, keep in mind, paradox with those examples are also going to be contrast. I'm contrasting a lion to a cat. You look at where is there parallel syntax. Well, that whole example of not afraid of a lion, but afraid of some joint of meat at the table. Not afraid of a lion, but afraid of a cat. Not afraid of starving, but afraid of some joint of meat at the table. That's going to be an example of parallel syntax. Parallel syntax, by definition, is also going to be an example of repetition. So, yes, the questions are challenging. I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to go, this passage is easy by any means. But there are clues where, in a case like this, if you found A, you found C. If you found B, you may have found E, or vice versa, you did. At which point, then, apostrophic speech would be the only one that's left. So, do take a note of all the answer options. Certainly, if a person did not see the word except, they were in trouble, because then they would have read a paradoxical statement and gone, there's A, but that's not what the question was asking for. About number 2, and this is one of the more challenging questions that were showing up. I think number 2, number 6, and number 9 were the ones that people struggled with the most, and those would be the ones that I would expect people to struggle with. Can be inferred from the passage that the speaker would agree with which of the following statements about fear. So certainly fear now is starting to show up. I would say a very critical question, or very critical word to take note of within the question itself is the fourth one, inferred. What's it mean to infer, or to make an inference? You're making an educated guess. So you're not really going to go, that's where the answer is. You can find examples of paradox and repetition, contrast, parallel syntax. You're not going to find a direct answer to this statement, but you just kind of have to make that assumption with it. No one went with E, and that is not the correct answer. So we got 25% going for A, 45% for B, 20% for D. So A, B, and D are really the three that are kind of jumping out. Anyone want to make any arguments for any of those? That would be a pretty big no. What did you cross off? Okay. Well, that's good. They're not the right answer. 1 out of 3 is a lot better chance than a 1 out of 5. Paragraph 2. As the ill affections of the spleen complicate, notice you get a footnote, so if you're not sure what spleen is going to mean, at least you know from the stance that Dunn would be writing about as to why it would be important, and mingle themselves with every infirmity of the mind, so doth fear insinuate itself in every action or passion of the mind. So doth fear insinuate itself in every action or passion of the mind. If you're going to paraphrase that, basically what is he writing, communicating? So doth fear insinuate itself in every action or passion of the mind. Everything that you do, you have fear. Regardless of what you're doing, there is some aspect of fear. Knowing that, or understanding that in everything you do, you have fear. Does A, B, or D, any one of those make more sense now? In everything that you do, fear exists. Every action, every thought. Fear is as simple to understand as any physical malady. We don't know what it's like to understand it. We just know it's there. You're saying B? You put B? Okay. Harboring fear is the greatest offense a believer can commit. How are you going to get rid of fear? There's only one way.
Okay.
Die. Freedom from fear is only realizable in the afterlife. If you're living and breathing, fear is going to be there. How do you get away from it? You die. Which isn't really a happy thought. But if it insinuates itself in every action or passion of the mind, that's the assumption that we can make. It's not saying that these things wouldn't necessarily be true, but we can make an educated guess that A would be correct based on the passage. B and D, we don't quite have that. And we're certainly going to get into some things where fear is pretty complex, and the fact that people cannot understand it is what makes it a lot more dangerous and deadly to people. Number 3, in the passage's second sentence, the speaker uses language that might best describe A. Second sentence is starting up here, in line 3, so I overtake him, I overrun him, I go faster, makes the pace slow. All of those things would lead us to waiting for those answers to trickle in. No one's going to a rugby match.
What even is rugby?
Yeah.
It's a scrum.
Anna plays rugby.
Foot race. A race. Pace. Faster. Now, this is a true statement. I did have a person one time ask me, what is a foot race? So, if you cannot realize that E is foot race, and that person passed the AP exam, that could kind of cause a little bit of an issue, but it is foot race. Seeing now the idea about pace, fast or slow, any questions about foot race, foot race? Number 4, most likely that the physician, going back to this line, and you'll notice that most of the questions go in chronological order and they tend to be clumped together. So you kind of go back to same parts of the passage over and over again. Why would the physician make his pace slow? We're getting an overwhelming response for E, which is correct. He knows that his fear shall not disorder the practice and exercise of his heart, but he knows that my fear may disorder the effect and working of his practice. He's disguising his fear because basically we can recognize that he probably is unable to identify what is the illness, what is the issue. So he is hiding his concern under the cover of medical procedure. Number 5 also kind of plays off number 4, at least with the same part of the passage. The speaker's physician is concerned that the patient's fear, not the doctor's fear, but what might the patient's fear do? He knows that his fear shall not disorder the practice and exercise of his art, but he knows that my fear may disorder the effect and working of his practice. If the fear disorders the effect, you got a pretty good word in answer B, weaken the efficacy or the effectiveness of the treatment. That ends up being the correct answer. Take this, you keep that. We're just going over it right now. And 75% we're going with B for that one. If you have any questions about any of the answers, like mentioning the correct one, but you're still going, I don't see it, let me know. Okay, 1 through 5. Luke, these are fresh in your mind, so we can now start calling on you all the time. How about number 6? Take note, it's an accept question. I guess I need to start it for you. Maybe, come on. There we go. Comparisons in lines 11 to 17 of fear with the spleen and the quote, wind in the body suggests that fear is all of the following except. So which one of these would fear not be? We got deceptive, persuasive, injurious, congenital, dynamic. After you submit your answers, then we'll go, well, what in the world does congenital mean? So what in the world does congenital mean? Any ideas? I mean, how? Like what? It's hereditary. So congenital heart failure is going to be that someone within the family has had the same issue before and it gets passed down. So it's not miscongeniality or anything like that, but it is dealing with, it's hereditary. Now, take note that this one is asking you to look only at those lines, 11 to 17, when it comes to fear, which is going to be the beginning of that second paragraph. As the ill affections of the spleen complicate and mingle themselves with every infirmity of the body, so doth fear insinuate itself in every action or passion of the mind. If fear is getting itself into every action or passion of the mind and will counterfeit any disease, what therefore can it do? If it's getting into every aspect, it probably has the ability to be persuasive. I would say if it's persuasive, it probably also is going to, I think two of those kind of go together, Carol. Yeah, I'd say persuasive and deceptive go together. Does it cause injury, pain? If it has the ability to cause pain and it's deceptive persuasive, that means it can probably take many forms, many shapes, sizes, which is going to make it dynamic, which means the only thing that's not getting referenced in that part is it being hereditary or congenital.
I've only missed one. I've only missed one.
Number 7, in lines 19 to 22. So, a couple lines after this. The speaker suggests that unauthentic valor is motivated by misguided altruism, self-destructive ambition, self-conscious insecurity, financial considerations, or hypocritical tendencies. No one's going D yet, so now someone can hit D for that token response. Got 29% at A, 33% at A, 17% at B, 39% at C, just bumped up to 42, and 10% at E. So A and C are the two that are up above. Both have at least 30%. Yeah, 30 and 45. What's an altruism? Or like altruistic beliefs? What'd you say? I want altruism. Yeah, like the of doing what is right. If you have altruistic values, you only do what is right. So if you have misguided altruism, you try to do what is right, but that's not necessarily going in the proper direction with the argument if it's going to be misguided. So 19 to 22. It shall seem valor, which is where we're starting. It shall seem valor in despising and undervaluing danger, and it is but fear in an overvaluing of opinion and estimation, and a fear of losing that. And I would say this would be the key part. It is but a fear in overvaluing of opinion and estimation, and a fear of losing that. If you are afraid of losing something, whether it be a physical object, or a person is afraid of losing love or friendship, what's a word that we would probably use to describe that person? If you're afraid of losing something, besides fearful, you're insecure, self-conscious insecurity, the fear of losing that is the unauthentic valor. So the fear of maybe losing respect, friendship, love is what causes people to, in a non-genuine manner, do act appropriately, or try to act appropriately. Number 8. A man that is not afraid of a lion supports the proposition that fear 84% are going C. This will be heartbreaking if that's wrong, and it's correct, so that's good. It's unpredictable and not bound by logic. So, which, keep in mind, I think this was, Aiden, you were making reference to this one at the very beginning when we said about paradox. What would be an example of paradox? Well, a person is not afraid of a lion, but is going to be afraid of a cat. That does not make sense. That seems contradictory. Therefore, it is going to be unpredictable and not necessarily bound by logic, which is going to make sense with paradox. Just like number 2, number 9 is one of those questions that is commonly missed. Number 2, number 6, number 9 are probably the 3 most common ones that will get missed by folks. So this one certainly can be a tough one. One could at least partially rebutte or argue the implication of lines 22 to 30 by noting that a man who is afraid of some joint of meat at the table might... Two most common answers are D and E, but we're still at over 50% going with D. Besides, I guessed, any rationales for D? Or E, I guess, at this point. So within the passage, a man is not afraid of a lion, afraid of a cat, not afraid of starving, yet is afraid of some joint of meat at the table presented to feed him, not afraid of the sound of drums and trumpets and shot, and those which they seek to drown, the last cries of men, and is afraid of some particular harmonious instrument. So much afraid as that with any of these the enemy might drive this man, otherwise valiant enough, out of the field. Syntactically, we know there's parallel structure. Repetition. From a punctuation standpoint, what's getting used a fair amount in that area? I mean, it's all one long sentence. There's commas. What else is getting used? We've got semicolons. What do semicolons do, besides prove that you think you're smart and went to college?
It's kind of like saying
Yeah, you link together two independent clauses, essentially two kind of sentences. So we can get a little highlighter crazy here. So we have a man is not afraid of a lion, is afraid of a cat. Okay, so that's one. Then we have not afraid of starving and is afraid of some joint of meat at the table presented to him. That would be our second example. Not afraid of the sound of drums and trumpets and shot, all which they seek to drown, the last cries of men, but is afraid of an instrument. And then you have the last one, so much afraid, as with any of these, the enemy might drive this man, otherwise valiant enough, out of the field. So you have three separate examples, the lion, the cat, the food, and then the instruments. Then that last part, starting in line 28, going to 30, we got a semicolon, new sentence. So much afraid, as with any of these, the enemy might drive this man, otherwise valiant enough, out of the field. That last phrase is making reference to the previous three. So this one, this one, this one. What would probably be a pretty key word that gets used in that last phrase? So much afraid, as with any of these, the enemy might drive this man, otherwise valiant enough, out of the field. What would be a pretty strong word that gets used in that last part that would align with one of the answers that we could get for 9? Olivia? How so? Okay, they're going to poison me with that food or whatnot, or something along those lines. I'm not afraid of starving, but I'm afraid of this food. Why? Because could be poor relations, some kind of enemy. I'm suspecting my host's intentions. D ends up being the correct response. And similar to number 2, it's requiring a very close reading to recognize that. And that's what makes those questions difficult. Keep in mind that the passing number for these first 12, if you get 6 right, you're batting 550%, that's passing. If you're getting up to like 2/3, so we're talking like 8 questions right, 9 questions right, Now you're talking cream of the crop, 4 or 5s and things like that. So you can't go, oh, I only got 7 out of 10. That's 70%. That is doing exceptionally well. So you have to have kind of a short memory with it. No questions are really easy, but I think these pronoun questions are ones that you need to try to get on a fairly regular basis. They in line 26 refers to, like, literally, what is the term they making reference to? Is it the drums and trumpets and shot, the word those, the last cries of men, any of these, or the enemy? Don't worry about the passage. But within writing, when can you use a pronoun like they, it, he, she? Like, when is it appropriate to use pronoun versus when can you not use a pronoun? And it being grammatically correct.
If you've already established a subject, you don't want to just like repeat the same subject.
I don't want to write Steinbeck over and over and over again, but I can go he or the author or something along those lines. But to use it, I have to establish who I or what I am writing about. So if I'm using the word they in line 26, I, as the test taker, am crossing out C and then D and then E because they're coming after. Doesn't mean I'm going to completely discount them, but I'm going to be putting a lot more emphasis on A and B to see which one of those might kind of jump out. And 65% of you are correctly recognizing that it's drums, trumpets, and shot with lines 25 to 26. So not afraid of the sound of drums and trumpets and shot and those which they seek to drown. So the drums, the trumpets, the shot, the sound, they are drowning out the last cries of men, so they is making reference to those. But I am certainly going to look at the examples that are coming before or in line 26 before I really start to consider 27 and 29. And those kinds of little clues can pop up on an AP question like this where you might be able to eliminate some options. You had a similar thing with the second passage. Question took place where you could eliminate 2 or 3 just based on the line numbers. Number 11, it's just a plug-in word, but, and, since, yet, unless. Which one of those would be an accurate replacement for how the word nor is getting used in line 31? You simply plug in the words, see which one works best. And the one that works best is going to be and. So say 89% of you. I'm sorry, 90% of you. Now that I give the answer, people start going. Last one. I fear not the hastening of my death, and yet I do fear the increase of the disease appears to be a contradictory statement because. How do we do? We did well. Concaminants. A concaminant, something that would happen simultaneously. So part of the reason why that would seem to be a contradictory statement, I fear not the hastening of my death, yet I do fear the increase of the disease. Those things tend to happen at the same time, so it would be a little bit of a surprise. Ben, you're doing a great job, but you don't have to worry about putting iPads away. Just leave them at the desk because next period is going to use them. But I appreciate your... Yeah, come on up.